A very good afternoon, Mr. Aman Nath, our esteemed guest for the panel over here. For people who still do not know who Aman Nath is, let me introduce him. Aman Nath is a historian by education, but from an early age, he has painted, written poetry, practiced graphic design and copywriting for several advertising campaigns. He has sold everything from beer to jeans to housing colonies and even India. I hope so, in a very positive way. He has co-written and authored 14 illustrated books on art, history, architecture, corporate biography, and photography, two of which have won national awards. These are also used as the official gift of the President and the Prime Minister of India. His book Jaipur was the first Indian book chosen to be marketed internationally by Christie's. As an inveterate traveler, after walking 400 kilometers to Mount Kailash and then sub-Antarctica, he has contributed to several travel magazines as well. Aman Nath is involved in the restoration of India's unlisted architectural ruins, now run as the Neem Rana non-hotel hotels, which have won awards from UNESCO, the Indian travel trade industry, and national awards. For his contribution to tourism, Nath has won the Lifetime Achievement Awards from Outlook Traveler and Continent's Traveler, India Hospitality Awards, Gallery of Legends, and Anandpur Sahib Heritage Foundation. He has also been appointed the Cavalier d'Ordre National de la Région d'Honneur by President of French Republic for his outstanding achievements in heritage conservation and his personal affection towards France. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Aman Nath.
Thank you so much.
Beginning with the book, Dome Over India. Dome Over India, written from an Indian perspective, is a comprehensive work that presents the many aspects of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Opening with historical context surrounding the creation of New Delhi, Dome Over India, Rashtrapati Bhavan examines the complex behind-the-scene discussions that took place before work could begin on the building. The central figure here is that of the architect Edwin Landseer Lutyens, who, dismissive of Indian tradition, was eventually coerced into Indianizing its design. Good for us. Aman Nath provides a fresh interpretation of the controversies that surround this legacy. Dome Over India takes the reader on a tour of Rashtrapati Bhavan from the Buddhist-inspired dome through the formal ceremonial halls and into the splendid Mughal garden with a mix of history, anecdote, and architectural analysis, revealing the imposing structure as never before. The people who have visited and lived and worked in this vast building, viceroys and presidents, heads of state and ambassadors, artists and freedom fighters, all form part of the story of Rashtrapati Bhavan. And I think it is this element which makes it so very unique. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of today's discussion is Central Vista, Fiction versus Facts, recalling an iconic book on the eve of its 20th year. Central Vista Redevelopment Project refers to the ongoing redevelopment to revamp the Central Vista, India's central administrative area located near Raisina Hill, New Delhi. The area was designed by Sir Edwin Lutyens and Sir Herbert Baker during British colonial rule and was retained by the Government of India after independence. Now scheduled between 2020 and 24, the project aims to revamp a 3-kilometer long Rajpath between Rashtrapati Bhavan and India Gate and convert North and South blocks to publicly accessible museums by creating a new common central secretariat to house all ministers, a new parliament building near the present one with increased seating capacity for the future expansion. The new residence and office for the Vice President and Prime Minister near the North Block and South Block and converts some of the older structures into museums. At the same time, there's a controversy that it is marred with. The conservationists say that the revamp will meddle with the history of the current building and the 1927 building will be a lost heritage. Another controversy that it is mired with is that the work has been going on uninterrupted despite the lockdown in the national capital and the center designating the center designated it as an essential service. And during the pandemic, when we are struggling with an economic crisis too, why do we need an parliament? So, welcome, Mr. Aman Nath. My first question as a moderator of this session to you is that illustrated with over 200 specially commissioned photographs combined with archival material, Dome Over India is a delightfully exhaustive amalgamation for lovers of history, architecture, and interiors. Mr. Nath, it's almost 20 years that you released your book, Dome Over India, which you wrote for President Narayanan. How was your book received then? And what is the relevance of its contents, especially when the Central Vista project is mired with so many controversies? Over to you, sir.
Well, the book was done in a short time of 6 months, although it was not done in a hurry, because I did go all out to do as much research that was possible. And when the book did appear in the UK and was launched in the UK, and the members of the Lutyens Trust came, they were absolutely dazzled to see the book. And they said to me, you must have done such intense research over 10 years, considering I'd only been given 6 months. It was received very well. The Royal Institute of British Architects, which is RIBA, wrote me to say that you can regard your book as a triumph. It speaks highly of the President's Secretariat also to commission such a book. And they made a joke in one of the reviews saying, imagine 10 Downing Street ever commissioning a book like this, which I thought was very nice of them to admit the reality. Because they said that a book like this, in all likelihood, can no longer be produced in England. So it is actually a very finely produced book, very finely detailed. Every page is like an artwork. So perhaps, here's the cover of the book, and it gives an idea of its size. But then it also opens and becomes very large. It has pages. It has panoramic pages, and it actually becomes 4 feet. So you get to see the splendor of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the halls, the frescoes, and so on. It's something that has to be put on a table. It's not really a coffee table book, as people call books which are large. It should be really a dining table book, if you want to call it, because when it opens, it is 4 feet in size. Yes. And the relevance of the book, the question you ask is, history repeats itself. And nowadays we say that more than repeating itself, history speeds itself. But still, the patterns of history recur faster than before. So if we, as a colonized people, have to remember, the pitfalls which led us to that, and so we have to be cautious of the traps of colonization, and how this monumental architecture which the British chose, 1400-year-old defunct Roman style to build in India to intimidate us, and how it worked, because even today it continues to intimidate us. We don't think of the Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjavur, which is 700 feet high, and all kinds of amazing architectures like, the Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas, but we are still so obsessed by one, should I say, defunct style of architecture, which was not even British, because the British brought Italian architecture through England to India, because there was a conscious movement in the early 17th century to say that Britain has no architecture of its own. So there is this wonderful architect called Inigo Jones, who first starts to copy Vitruvian Renaissance architecture and build it in England. And then in 1666 is the fire of England, fire of London. So then they raised the coal tax because it needed funds and built 54 churches, all in Renaissance Italian style. And Lutyens is impressed by that and brings that to India, which has really no relevance to India or to England. And we are then so impressed by it that ever since they came, we have no great Indian architecture to talk about post 1757. When Padmanabhapuram comes to an end, even the Stoke Palace, which is in Ladakh, it predates that. So that means they were successful in intimidating us about our architectural styles. And so the relevance is that we should be cautioned about this.
So going forward from that was really very enlightening. And when we saw the book, you could actually give Michelangelo a run for his money with its vastness and its opulence of style. Sir, my other question, the next question to you is that the Central Vista was designed, as we just spoke, by Edwin Lutyens and Herbert Baker, when the capital of the British Raj was moved from Calcutta to Delhi. After the independence in 1947, it became the seat of the government of the new republic, and then declared as a heritage precinct in the 1962 Master Plan of Delhi. So tell us a bit about the legacy of this colonial style used for the architecture that surrounds the Central Vista on both sides.
Well, actually, the Central Vista had nothing really to do with Herbert Baker, but because the plan of Delhi was made by Edwin Lutyens, or so people say. But the truth is, when you research, there is an architectural historian in England. He is a great specialist of the Lutyens period, and he was also commissioned by the Lutyens Trust to come to India, to travel his path, to look at his diaries, and he produced very elaborate work. And he, after studying everything, says that although the planning of Delhi was a group effort, it has been attributed to Lutyens. So it's not that the plan is made by him, because this is an Englishman who came after it was done, and he came up with this comment. Also, when I did my elaborate research of all the correspondence of the time between the king, the queen, the secretary of state, and everything, it becomes very evident that Edwin Lutyens did not conceive the plan of Delhi. Because when he is first asked to do so, he copies almost New York. So you have cross streets which are going north, south, and east, west. So there's nothing original about that design. So when he produces it to Lord Hardinge says, I have lived in these parts, because he was only visiting and he went back. And he said, when summer comes and dust storms blow through the city, there'll be havoc, because, I live in Delhi and you know how Delhi is. When a dust storm comes, it'll go right through. So he orders him, and is a very enlightened client, if I might say, to say, I want a city made with roundabout and avenues planted with trees, so that when a dust storm blows through, or when cold air blows through in winter, it is cut. And to support his argument, he then gives him three plans. He gives him the plan of Paris, which is obviously done by a Frenchman. He also gives him the plan of Washington and the plan of Canberra, which had recently been built by a husband-wife team in Australia. But the joke is that the British were trying to outdo France. They were forever saying, the King's Way is bigger than the Champs-Élysées, and the Governor General's Palace is bigger than Versailles. But the inspirations that they had were both French again, because the plan of Washington is made by a French architect called Charles L'Enfant.
Right.
So they go to Paris and Washington and come back with a French design to build in India to outdo France in Paris. because London wasn't up to the mark. So it's actually already, the question could be wrong when we say, you know, that Lachans planned Delhi. He didn't, because he was told once, twice, and thrice, and then he finally comes up with his design, which is really Lord Hardinge's design. And if this were not true, because, you know, Lachans tried to hog credit for everything that he didn't do, that was his style in life. So eventually, 11 years before he dies, you know, his conscience catches up with him, because he realizes that he wouldn't have got this fabulous design done if it wasn't for the client that Lord Hardinge was. So he says in a very warm tribute, which he wrote in 1933, which was actually pointed out to me through the research of Robert Gradich. And he says that it is the new city owes its being to Lord Hardinge. His patience and courage in times of great stress, personal and political, his even temper in the midst of diverse discussion remain in my memory as being parallel only to the greatness of his conception. Lachans is saying this. So Lachans is saying that he conceived Delhi, he backed me, he saw it through. So it's really Lord Hardinge who is the father of Delhi and the conceiver and conceptualizer of the design. So that's one misconception which needs to be clarified. Yes.
Yes, sir. I mean, goes on to reinstate the fact that Lachans was a lesser known architect of London, and he just grew to become well known in India only because he got the chance to construct number of these great constructions like the Rashtrapati Bhavan, Parliament House, India Gate, and the others. That goes on to also say, I'm made to believe here after hearing you that history is mostly guessing, right? The rest is all prejudice. So
no, it's also self-promotion, you know, because Lord Hardinge had only one daughter who died during his lifetime, and Edwin Lutyens had, you know, his son wrote about him, his daughter wrote about him, his granddaughter, great-grand-niece, up till now, you know. So he's got so many books about him. Then a legend was made about him. But in the year 1969, which was a year of his centenary, he was so unpopular in England that although he was the president of the Royal Academy of British Architects, they were not able to gather enough money to have an exhibition, a centenary exhibition for himself. So he's been made great in India. Even in England, he was not considered so great.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So also, moving to another question over here, that Information Stories announce that 3 iconic buildings are to be demolished when it comes to the new project. The Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, the INCA, the Nationwide Archives Annex, and the Nationwide Museum. So it is said that INCA was warned about his destiny some months forward. However, the museum states that they hardly got any time to reorganize their stuff, and it takes months to organize inventories, to pack with care the kind of stuff they have, and apparently one is to deal with objects and paperwork from many centuries. And those opposing this move also say that the structures are not simply brick and mortar, they've been venues of assembly of minds, and which artwork in his proper or her proper thoughts would recommend raising them. What is this talk about breaking all museums in favor of offices and reducing culture to just symbolism?
I think that at this moment, it amounts to the Modi haters trying to bash him. Because, you know, people, as I said, in India, we are the last ones to know about our history. Even you wouldn't know that the National Museum today stands where a beautiful building stood, where the Asiatic antiquities of Sir Aurel Stein, which was a great collection, was housed. And it was Nehru who ordered the breaking of that building to make the National Museum. And it was a Congress which broke down the house of the Vice President of India, which was Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, which was for King George's Road, where the Vigyan Bhavan is made. So there was no talk at that time of, us destroying, British legacy or Lutyens. Lutyens, in any case, didn't build any of these, but of colonial buildings. So why is so much fuss being made now? Because if they could break down the buildings, and Intact did a listing of all these buildings, they in 83 or sometime, and the only building that they said that should not be raised was the Vigyan Bhavan. So all these other buildings, Shastri Bhavan and Nirman Bhavan and all that, are not even considered heritage buildings, which are post independence. And if we are talking about the Indira Gandhi Center, which was built after a competition and much controversy, its basements are damp. You cannot keep art there. I have a friend who's given his father's collection there and was housing it. And he said the sooner they're removed, the better it is, because it's nothing so great. So if the Nehruvian era can break down buildings which were built for Imperial Delhi, then why can't today's government break down buildings built post-independence and one or two of those buildings, because they're putting the whole thing to order. In the late 19th century, the whole of Paris was put to order. Baron Haussmann broke hundreds of buildings because they had to get into the old quarters. They had to make, buildings, areas where the fire, vans could reach, where water could reach. So this kind of reorganization is very important. I don't think that such a big fuss needs to be made
so
about
what happens
this.
is that, sorry.
Yes. No, also you asked another question.
Actually, what happens is people are always fascinated with events that came before them. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I feel that, as you said, that the government haters are the ones who are spreading these kind of rumors, or as we say, then why isn't the government refuting these facts? And people have these, people are going on with their misconceptions that the green cover will be lost, the style will be compromised, and we'll be just looking at, matchbox blocks of office buildings, a concrete sky. Why doesn't the government come up with something?
Well, it's a question you should be asking the government, but I am neither the government nor from any of the political parties. I think in my life, I have restored 32 buildings in 18 states of India. And I know that wherever you go, everything always begins with opposition. When I had a black beard, they would say, here comes a smuggler, he's going to do smuggling in this ruin. So, I didn't have to print pamphlets and say who I was, that I was a historian, that I was interested in this. I just went along in my work. And in a course of time, people got to know me. And then I employed the people, like in Neemrana village, for example. When I first arrived, they said that I was, there was an article in the press to say I was an agent of Rajneesh, because he was looking for a place to come away from America because he was being thrown out. And I went with a friend who resembled Rajneesh, and I probably looked like a Rajneesh sort of man in a kurta pajama. So for 5 years after that, it went on. People kept saying, you're an agent of Rajneesh. But I didn't refute it because I was not. I just got on with my work. And when Neemrana opened, and then people started to clap, to come, and but 250 people are employed there. The village knows me inside out. So everybody is silenced. I think that Mr. Modi is possibly following, that route, that he's getting on with good work, and he'll watch the people first shut up and then eat their words. So
maybe he does not want to render any dignity to the accusations by even responding to them.
Yes, I think so. He has been elected by 1.3 billion people, and his decisions represent them. If he doesn't represent some people, that's all right. And you also mentioned about artifacts, about being damaged. What do we think is the competence of India today? Are we nil? Because, when the festivals of India happened, in the time of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, when he was Prime Minister, the greatest treasures, went all over the world. And under Popul Jaikar's, things went to the Smithsonian, they went to England, things went to Australia, they went to France. So why can't we store those very treasures in Delhi? Are we saying that we are not capable of packing and storing things from Delhi to Delhi, that which we can do from Delhi to England to New York to Melbourne? So I think this is just rabble rousing.
Yeah, so we're deficient in more ways than one here. So, sir, moving on to the next, do you think that their opposition, the opposition's opposition to the Central Vista undertaking, is based on the facile grounds that many heritage buildings within the Lutyens bungalow zone, the LBZ as we'll be calling it from here on, are being destroyed, or is that entire accusation is completely misplaced, or that the conservationists also say that the revamp is going to meddle with the history of the current buildings? They still maintain this design by Lutyens. You've just set the record right. And hence a 1927 building will lose its heritage. In the same breath, what is this relatively new obsession of India with museums? Where did we get this from?
Well, I have two comments on this. First, when we keep saying Lutyens bungalow zone, Lutyens bungalow zone, I want to clarify that not one bungalow in what we call Lutyens bungalow zone is made by.
But on paper, that is what it says.
No, it doesn't say, because of our own stupidity and our lack of historical sense. When I was in college, it was, I think, in the year 1972, because as I mentioned, in 69, they had not managed to gather enough funds to do a centenary exhibition of Lutyens. But then, 71 or 72, I don't remember, I was still at college, there was an exhibition in Rabindra Bhavan with the British Council put up, and I went because we were students, we were taken along at the end of the exhibition to the British High Commissioner's residence, where we got tea, and we were very impressed because, we were still colonized more than we are today, because the decolonization process takes a time. First the physical and then the mental, because the psyche is also colonized. So at that point, all these NDMC people, yes, who were bending and phoning before the High Commissioner and all his staff, they decided that they would call, to honor Lutyens, call it Lutyens bungalow zone, when they didn't even know that one bungalow was not made by him. And when they'd asked the King Emperor that this city is getting ready, what shall we call it? And chamchas there are in every country, so they said, shall we call it George Garh? Because that was George V, and his wife was called Queen Mary. So they said, shall we call it Mary Bad? And they said, no, forget all this. There is Delhi, so let's just call it New Delhi. So that is how a monarch responded. He didn't want to put his name onto posterity. And at this end, there was Lord Irving was putting his name to everything. He said, oh, I was not here, when the foundation stone was laid. So how do I fit into this story? So on the dome of Rashtrapati Bhavan is a stone, says, here is the last stone of Delhi, and it's completed, and it's laid by Lord Irving. So he's forcing his name into it. And what was called the stadium, what we call the National Stadium, he called it the Irving Stadium. He held a darbar in which, when the king and queen couldn't come, he sat on the throne and received all the Maharajas. So, there are different aspects of it. And back to museums, your second question. Museums actually are a very important part of dead civilizations. So the Western civilizations which are dead, because, Greece, Rome, Mesopotamia, Egypt, all those great civilizations, there is no trace of them. So when we sing this song, Sare Jahan Se Acha, Hindustan Hamara, we say, Yunan, Mishra, Roma, Sab mit gaye jahan se, kuch baat hai ki hasti mitti nahi hamari. It's not just words, it's true, because we are the only continuously alive civilization in the whole world. So for us, a museum has less value. Of course, we should have museum because we've got so much of a past to preserve, but we're callous about this. Now, look what happens in Kolkata. How many Kalis are made? I mean, the statues of Kali. Yeah. And what beauty, if you look at them closely, like you will see every nerve of the hand, you will see, and they have the courage, because we are a living civilization. Imagine if we put them into museums. The Horniman Museum in London has taken one of these Kalis and put it in the museum.
Because it's vibrant and living.
Yes, it's vibrant. So we throw it in the Ganges and next day we create it again. But in London, when you go to the Horniman Museum and you see one Kali, which has been carried there, it is absolutely resplendent, you know, with a spear, with a Mahishasura and all that. But those are dead cultures. They need to preserve this. So I think this obsession is very Western oriented. It bounces off our interaction with the West.
Yes, sir. So since we do not have lots of time, one last question that I want from you, that when the cash-starved Maharashtra authorities issued tenders for 900 crore redevelopment of the MLA hostel at Nariman Point in Delhi, in Mumbai, and not too long ago, right? And then there was a Chhattisgarh authorities who stole the building work of the new Raj Bhavan meeting and CM House solely after BJP President JP Nadda identified the duplicity of the Congress a few days in past. Then why are these so-called Lachans Bhakt so riled over this when money is being spent on other factors, just because they feel that this is a wasteful expenditure, especially when the pandemic has hit us and so many millions and millions of people are suffering and the country is also facing an economic crisis according to them?
I am actually not a specialist of the question you're asking, but I think that your answer lies within your question. Because as we said, you know, if the Congress government is opposing something because the BJP is doing it, then the BJP is opposing what the Congress is doing. There's hypocrisy on both sides. So if the Maharashtra government thinks they can get away with murder, then why aren't they letting you know, the BJP do exactly the same? I think that it's time for India to become more mature, to grow up, and not just because one government is in power, it becomes the sole duty of the other government to start by saying they got up with the wrong foot on this side of the bed or that side of the bed. We have to get on with nation building. We have to get on with progress. And the priorities of the moment have to be decided by the people elected at that moment. So if the Maharashtra government is elected by whoever elected them, whether it's a coalition between, you know, shaky coalition or not, or a, you know, matlabi coalition, it's for them to decide what they are doing, right or wrong. And I wouldn't like to comment about it.
But so even like, you know, a group of veterans have also written to the President Ram Nath Kovind seeking his intervention as head of state to direct the government to postpone the Central Vista project by 2 years, citing the pandemic and the catastrophic scarcity of nearly everything. But sir, one last question again, I'm tempted to ask you this. What is the real fiscal estimate of this project? We keep hearing different figures every now and then.
You know, I'm not the Minister for Housing. This is something that should be answered by Mr. Hardeep Puri, because, you know, I am not privy to their facts and figures, but it must be proportionate to their pocket and to whatever their ambitions are. But I do very sincerely believe and back the idea that if 51 ministries are going to be all put face to face in a place where not one single tree is going to be chopped, where they're going to realign the slopes. You know, when we go walking in the gardens of India Gate, you cannot walk because there's water standing there. So I went there to see what was happening. They have realigned the slopes. All the sewage treatment plants for these 51 ministries will clear the water which will flow in those channels. And the channels have been lined with Kota stone so that, you know, it doesn't sink and there's no mildew and dirt. So it's going to be a very splendid vista with more trees, with better parking, better places to walk. And when the Republic Day happens, you know, there'll be many more bridges. They won't be, the army won't have to construct temporary bridges every time for people to cross over. You know, we're a country with brains, with design facilities. We've got all the means. And I think when we are coordinating all that and doing something, just because the architect who has been chosen is called Bimal Patel and not Sir Bimal Patel, you know. So, you know, we treat him as an ordinary person, and rude articles appear in magazines in England saying that he is like Hitler's architect and so on. How dare they, you know, call our Prime Minister Hitler, and how dare they call Mr. Bimal Patel, a third-rate architect. You know, it's not their business. So when England is renovating or France is doing the Champs-Élysées, India is not publishing stupid articles to say their choice of architect is wrong and so on. So I think the more we are criticized in headlines,
yes,
the
sir,
more flattered we should be. Because, you know, at least we are the subject of the world's conversation, you know. I mean, you know, if we have Paris, London, New York giving headlines against Modi and saying, why is he doing this? You know, at least they're looking at India. We're not that little nation they can overlook. We will do what we will do and let the world go on blubbing as much as they want. That
right,
should
sir.
be our stance.
On a closing note here, I also feel that the opposition's upset seems extra about legacy than in regards to the pandemic or the expenditure. Having named whole lot of establishments under one household, they appear fearful that the Nehru-Gandhi legacy of institution building will be usurped. They are ridiculing the brand new PM home also as Modi ka ghar. Nevertheless, it was they who slyly transformed the PM house at Teen Murti into Nehru Memorial Museum after Jawaharlal Nehru's demise. And
Absolutely.
many people also do not know that there are new structures coming up like the Parliament building. There are also structures which are being repurposed like the old Parliament and the North and South block, and there are structures that will be retained the way that they are, and there will be others that are being demolished and then remade or relocated to a new place. But after this entire discussion with you viewers, I leave you with a question. Don't you think that India can no longer be defined by its colonial symbols, and that they should neither be destroyed nor appropriated, but they can simply remain as a symbol of the bygone era, but certainly not a guideline for a future? Maybe another 100 years, and this new structure that is being made will also be labeled as obsolete. As they say, बहुत गरूर था छत को छत होने का, एक मंजिल और क्या बनी की छत फर्श हो गई. So I extend
Absolutely.
a very warm note of thanks to Mr. Aman Nath for being such a gracious guest to Delhi Book Fair pragatiE Vichaar, and for a curator, Shabri Prasad, for bringing us together on this platform. With you, Shabri, around, nothing can go wrong. And so it's a bye from now from my end, and over to Mr.
You didn't want me to give a closing note, you know, you
Aman
said
Nath, in case he wants to say something.
Yes, you can edit it out if you don't want it, you know. I think it's a very good point you made, you know, about the Teen Murti house becoming a museum. It should never have been, because if you look at 10 Downing Street, which is the most famous address in the world, are we saying that Disraeli, Chamberlain, Churchill, you know, there's a list of, you know, from 1720, from Walpole's time onwards till now, if they started making a museum of 10 Downing Street, it would have run out of those 20, earlier there were 20 houses, now there are 10, it would have run out from this street down to the sea and into Europe, you know. So, you know, we can't go on and on justifying what has wrong, which has been done, and now criticizing, you know, people for the same that they are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Aman Nath. That was a very enlightening, very deep, very insightful talk. And thank you, pragatiE Vichaar. Namaskar. We'll see you again soon.
I hope so too.
Bye-bye.